Thank you for listening to the Allender Center podcast. I'm Dr. Dan Allender.
And I'm Rachel Clinton Chen. We're fiercely committed to providing hope and healing to a fragmented world.
And restoration for the heart.
Thank you for joining us. Let's get this conversation started.
John, welcome back. I have the great privilege for another week to have my dear, dear friend John Eldredge join us to talk about his new book, Resilient. And it's such an obvious statement, but it's like, buy it. Buy it. It will be a great gift for your summer reading. Now, when I think of summer reading, I don't usually think about a book like this, but I think there is no better summer reading than to engage what has kept us, but also what will restore for us something of our heart of joy, a sense of the goodness of God in the land of the living. And just to know, no chainsaw at the beginning of our time. So
no chainsaws this week.
I put it aside. I cut down as many trees as I thought I would rightfully. I told Becky about my chainsaw comment, and she said, "Do you remember the one time you actually rented a chainsaw and your son, I think he was like 12 or 13, so this is like 20 years ago, literally collapsed and began crying because he was sure that I was going to cut a limb off." And yeah, so the idea that I was chainsawing really it's not a good image.
Well, I know the idea of summer reading. Honestly, there are many, many, many people who are saying, again, because of the effects and the cascade and all that we've been talking about, I can't read very much these days. Listen to the audiobook. Get audiobooks. I got the funnest permission. So, Matthew McConaughey's book, Green Lights, on his audiobook, he just riffs and he tells stories and he goes off script. And so I went to my publisher and I said, "Can I do that, please?" And they said, "Sure." So on the audiobook, not only do I just get to read to you.
Wait a minute. Let me double check on this. The fact that you read your own book, I found it to be so much torture that I refused to ever do it. But you actually get to play with the categories while you're also reading the book.
Yes. I stop. I tell stories. When it comes time for there's guided reflection prayers at the end. We start playing music, and it moves into this very lovely experience. So it's really fun. So if that sounds more restful to you, the audiobook is very life-giving.
Yeah. Well, let's step back into what you're trying to accomplish through the book, what you're doing through the new app that is the 30-day restoration of resilience. And I just want to see if we can capture a few of the core categories that people can anticipate reading or hearing more about. Like, what is it that our hearts need to grow and to, in some sense, flourish in the midst of this long season?
Yes. Now, you and I we're going to have some fun for a moment because we have to establish a context. And one of the contexts is we are all children of the Enlightenment, whether we want to admit it or not. And we still hold to the idea that more information will somehow bring about the restoration that we seek. Okay, and that's just simply not true. This isn't about the acquisition of new insights in and of themselves. That's a very outdated model, but the church is still enamored with it. A second thing I want to clarify that I think will really help folks is that we as human beings are amphibians.
This was hilarious, yes.
Okay, this is really helpful. We are amphibians. We live in a natural world that has all sorts of nourishment for the human soul. Dinner with friends, laughter, a great movie, a walk on the beach. I mean, fill your summer with that stuff, folks. Like, that works. It's beauty heals, nature heals, yeah, time away, all that. We live in a natural world, but we also live in a spiritual world. And we are meant to move as comfortably in the spiritual as we do in the physical. But in John chapter 3, Jesus has the engagement with the Pharisee named Nicodemus, who seems like a really good guy. He's a good-hearted man. He is asking the questions. And Jesus says to him, he says, how will you understand spiritual things if you cannot even understand natural things? Like, he's frustrated with his refusal to be an amphibian. He is. Let me tell you why this is important. Because the book was born out of a prayer in the book of Ephesians in chapter 3, where St. Paul prays for us. And he says, I pray that your Creator would fill your inmost being with a new glorious strength from his Spirit that indwells within you. That is so gorgeous. That is so filled with hope, because it shows us that gospel resilience is not bootstraps. This isn't one more program, gang, of get your act together. Come on, be more disciplined, go to church, read your Bible. Like those things are helpful as part of an overall, life of well-being, but gospel resilience is imparted into your humanity from heaven, from God, from the kingdom of God. That there are resources that come to us. And so Paul's describing a process whereby the Spirit of the living God inside the depths of your being, right down there in your depleted reserves, begins to replenish and renew you by the presence of God within you. I find that very hopeful.
Oh, immensely. Well, and the idea that we can be rooted in love, and though that which is incomprehensible can still be to some degree comprehended, something of the length, the height, the width, the depth of his love. There's something about beginning with the category being beloved that's so different than, as you put it well, a new program of efficiency.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And what is so also just luscious in that passage is he says, may you experience the love of Christ. So the whole perspective of being amphibians is that we experience tactile, real, living experience of the care of God, the solace of God, the love of God for us in very particular ways. This is the hope. And so we just say this: the soul is healed through union with God. The soul is healed through union with God. But that enlightenment, we still talk about the Christian faith as a set of beliefs, right? Or a set of practices. But at its core, it is more like marriage. At its core, it is intimacy with the living God, where your being and his being become intertwined, where you are being nourished with resources way outside your own creation. Like, you don't have to come up with this. You don't have to suck it up and just get on with your life. This is very, very good news.
So talk about union, because I think a lot of people from a more kind of a biblically static notion have that notion of it's a positional. We've been given union, and
You
you're
are a
talking.
good Presbyterian, Dan.
I am. I'm a good 1 point Calvinist. Yeah. So when you talk about experience, you do know that it raises hackles, but also hope and desire for many people.
Yes. Yes. My goodness. Where do we begin? Okay, let's do this. Let's do this. I think this will be a fun little romp. Let's take this. We'll get to the answer to that question through a fun path. So first there was Eden. And Eden was where the intimacy, the joy, Eden's what everybody's looking for, right? It's the surf vacation you're dreaming about. It's the dinner you want to throw for friends. We're just always looking to recreate, to find the doorway back in. Okay, we lost Eden. And then God begins his redemption of the human race through the people of Israel, who he intends will be a blessing to all nations.
The nations.
Okay, that's that's the repeated phrase. You will be a blessing to all nations. Okay, well, so where it happens, first there is the tabernacle, and then there is the temple. And the tabernacle and then the temple was where the living God came back to be with humanity. This is the beginning of the recovery, guys. So stay with me here. Here's the fascinating thing. When you walked into, if you look at the description of the tabernacle and the temple, it is Eden. It is Eden imagery. It's flowers, trees, jewels, gold, beauty. There's aromas, all of it. You are meant to feel like for a moment we got back into the garden. Okay? So they were little outposts of Eden in the world because God was there, right? I mean, the tree of life himself, he's right there. Okay. So in the New Testament, the temple changes location.
Rather dramatically.
To the heart. This is the Ephesians 3 prayer that we were talking about last time. To the heart of the follower of Jesus. That is the new temple. This is really, really significant, folks. So stay with us here. You are now the temple of the living God, meaning this is where he's going to abide and dwell and express himself in the world, okay? The triune God comes to, okay, well, that means that your heart is a little outpost of Eden and is meant to experience something of the life of Eden in it. Okay, now if you're not making this stuff up, so in the book of Revelation, city of God comes down to the earth. John sees the tree of life, and so he's like, "Oh my gosh, Eden's back!" Right? Eden's back because the tree of life is here. Okay, and the river of life is flowing right through the city. Okay, now we're getting to the application. So in John 7, Jesus says, I want that river to flow through your heart because your heart is a little outpost of Eden in the world, and I want the river of life flowing through your heart. Okay, so now this is why we must be amphibians. It is not purely intellectual. It is not even obedience or ethical living. It is that the presence of the living God is so luscious, it flows like a river. Rivers are unending. They're unceasing. They're moving. They're living, but it doesn't like stop. You don't get like 8 gallons and that's your allotment for today. Sorry, you did your 2 quarts and then the river just stops. Like the whole imagery of a river is it just keeps going. You go back to the North Fork of the Blackfoot every year and it's still there.
Yeah.
And it's still flowing. You're like, holy cow, this thing is just always flowing. Okay, that's the idea, that the presence of a living God. So I'm reading these passages and I'm going, you know what? I never, ever asked for it. And so I began to ask. I pray that you would restore Eden in my heart. I pray that the river of life would flow in my heart. And he is very, very glad to answer those prayers.
Yeah. Part of the question that rises within me, because we've been to many rivers together, small streams and some pretty vast, large rivers. That question of how do you find the river of life, in one sense, replenishing you? I mean, the awareness that I don't have joy now is a huge beginning point to say, I believe and I'm practicing, but there's something in the experience of what you're describing as foreign, maybe foreign for many people, like in a totality, maybe more circumstantial over the last year or two. But that sense of how easy it is to feel guilty that I don't know that joy, rather than being able to say, how is my awareness that there's just not the joy, there's not that flow, there's not that replenishment that seems to be evident in what we're being invited to?
Yes. Okay. Yep. If you look at the purpose of spiritual practices down through the ages, they are designed to put us into a position that we can receive more of this life, of this presence. I mean, the mind-blowing thing is the temple was filled with the glory of God. Your humanity is actually meant to be filled with the glory, meaning the regenerative power of God. John at Cana, when Jesus turns water into wine, it says he revealed his glory. Like, it's glory that turns water into wine. Okay. Paul in Romans 6 says it's glory that raised Jesus from the dead. So it's not just like shiny. Okay.
No.
It's not weird. It's not, you don't have to be a charismatic to tap into this, folks. You are an amphibian. The regenerative presence of the living God is meant to dwell within the temple. Well, you're the temple now. Okay. So practices that put you in the place to receive it. One is simply asking for it. Like, go pray Ephesians 3:14-19. It's lovely. It's so nourishing. Ask for it. Pray John 7, where the river of life flows. Say, I want that, please. Yes, I'm here. Okay. But then you do. So we're back to union. It all flows out of our union with God. There are things you do every day that erode your union, and things you do that restore your union with God. Okay. And you were talking about the distraction, the technology, the compulsion to pick up your phone again. All that stuff erodes. It erodes your union with God. It depletes you. Okay. You are fragmented by it. Okay. Quiet, a walk in the park, sitting at the beach, listening to beautiful music, that restores your union because it brings you back to yourself and it centers you with the presence of God. Okay. So I would suggest that you find a few things where, for you as an individual, it might be riding your road bike early in the morning. It might be listening to Tchaikovsky. It's you find yourself centered as a person, not fragmented. You're like back to yourself. You're back in your body. And you are experiencing the presence of God. However gently, however subtly, that's okay. He's very, very gentle. He doesn't just come walking in with like fireworks and strobe lights, okay? He's very, very gentle with the restoration of the soul. Mm-hmm. And asking for, I need union with you. I need union. I don't need answers. I need union with you. Heal my soul's union with you. And therefore, these other graces can then begin to flow in us. Then we can be amphibians and we can receive these things.
Well, if union is seen as merely positional rather than an experiential joy, then it's hard to then step into a kind of assessment, like, where am I? Am I in union with him? And I think this was years ago, but even restored again through both the book, but also the 30-day restoration. Just asking Jesus for more, but also being very aware that my union needs to be healed on a daily basis, just as comparable to the fact that the tensions between Becky and I need to be acknowledged. And, some time ago, I said to her, "Are we well?" And she said, "Our union is well." And it's like, again, that question of, oh, if I'm asking my wife if we're well, why am I not actually saying, Jesus, I need my union with you restored, and on a daily basis, not when I'm only most aware of it, but almost on a presumptive basis that there will be assaults against my union that require, that invite, that actually sweetly restore this amphibian play of the two worlds.
Yes, the apathy creep we were talking about, the lethargy creep that we ended the last episode with, that is trying to get to the epicenter. It is trying to get to your union with God and erode it through fear, worry, hatred, accusation, self-contempt, just all that stuff, right? Fragmentation, distraction, alcohol, whatever it is that you are going to. But I just have to come back to, John opens his first epistle, 1 John, with this. He says, look, that which we have from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our own eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched. Okay. So he is describing experience. Experience. He says, we proclaim to you so that you also may have fellowship with us and our fellowship with the Father and with his Son, Jesus. Okay. The invitation is, you get to experience everything. It is deeply experiential. You get to hear Jesus speak to you. You get to experience his presence within you. Here's another fascinating thing. Like, you understand, like, we are opening up massive categories, and we're trying to do it in a 35-minute podcast. But where is Jesus when you pray? Where is Jesus when you pray? Is he up in the heavens? Are you praying to the Lord of the heavens? Is he by your side? Because, again, he moved inside of you. That's where he lives now. You're the temple, the presence of God. And this is Ephesians 3 again. Christ may fill your hearts. Okay, so I'm suggesting a new way of praying, that you begin to give your attention, and I would suggest affection, because this will really get you there. You begin to love Jesus, who lives within you. So you begin to turn your attention inward, okay? Jesus within me, I love you. Jesus within me. Now, okay, I know. There's all these little things of, but I'm not sure about this. I'm not, just stay with this. This is Thomas à Kempis. This is Teresa of Avila. This is John of the Cross. Like, honestly, gang, like, this is so rich in the Christian tradition. It is Christ in you, Paul says, that is the hope of glory, of regenerative power, okay? So you begin to give your attention, not to the God of the heavens, or the God of the forest, but to the God, the incarnate God in Jesus Christ, who is now dwelling within you, and you commune with him there.
Again, what it invites, at least my heart to, is a stance that requires a different kind of listening, a different kind of attentiveness, a quiet that I am not naturally drawn to.
No one is. But some people less than others.
Yes. Well, and again, what I would say is I have the ability to listen well to others and to stay with their story, the complexity of their own experience. But I found through the process of almost having to say, I need to listen to my own heart as if it's one of my clients. Again, I'm not a terribly mature man, but that really was helpful to say, let your heart speak. Listen to the different parts within you that are actually either noisy or unwilling. And you do talk about the reality of unconverted parts of us.
Yes. Yes. Because see, what we're doing, Dan, is we're laying out a whole new concept. It's not new. This is not new. I just read 1 John. We are recovering an understanding of salvation. Salvation is the regeneration of your original created design. It's a rescue plan. It takes place when you are inhabited by Christ in your emotions, in your appetites, in your rage, in your fear, in your intellectual life, that Christ comes to inhabit more and more of our humanity. This is what it means to be saved, because then you find, you know what, I actually forgive that person. I was working so hard on that. I just do. I just forgive them. There's a grace there now. You find, you and I confess that we were both turning a little bit too much to alcohol in the early stages of the quarantine.
Indeed.
To get us through the day. And I come from a long alcoholic background, and I looked at that and went, gadzooks, like that does not have a good future on it. And the Christ inhabit my desire here. And this is where the grace comes from. This is where the help comes from. It is as we are more and more inhabited by Christ. So you mentioned the unconverted places. This stuff just shows up. It shows up in traffic. It shows up with, irritating people. It shows up with your relatives. What we normally do is shame it and exile it.
Yeah.
Right? We rebuke it and we send it to the basement. But that doesn't do anything. It doesn't help anything. No transformation takes place there at all. Instead, what I am recommending is you say, oh my gosh, here it is, Lord. Would you inhabit this? I ask you for salvation here, which is to be inhabited by Christ in this place. My sexuality, whatever it is, my lack of planning, my refusal to engage. It's a Christ. I don't just need to be a disciplined person. That's insufficient. What I need is the presence of the living God inhabiting the unconverted places in me, so that more and more. It was C.S. Lewis's secretary, Walter Hooper, who, after Lewis died, they were asking him, what it was like to live with C.S. Lewis in his later years. And Hooper said, he was the most converted man I ever met.
What a statement.
And by that, he meant there was more of his personality, more of his humanity inhabited by Christ than most of the other people Hooper knew. That's what we're after.
Well, it just the image of shame and exile feels like what it leads to is a certain kind of self-righteousness bound to desolation. And when you combine those two together, like, I'm doing it right and I am empty as hell, you've got the worst of all forms of fundamentalism. A kind of I'm in control and I am empty and without joy. And that kind of disposition, again, is one of those categories to be able to go, Jesus, I know that's within me, the capacity to shame, exile, and feel very proud about it, but also know I am very, very empty. And just again, this image, because I'm going back to the garage after I stopped the Stairmaster, sat down, and your invitation was nothing about feeling shame, but I felt like, oh yeah, I just got caught. And to be able to stop and go, oh no, this is an invitation into the temple to listen in a way that I can pass by in a kind of rote religious form way too easily. So that tending to our own, in some sense, desolated heart, asking, oh, I want more. I want the river of life flowing. And I can't make it happen, but there is something that begins, I use the image of water, bubbling up, that feels like, oh, this could be what the Spirit indeed has for me. And I want more. But there I find that, you were talking about the Enlightenment. And, the Enlightenment begins with knowledge is power. And then the flip side is, and I'm a skeptic that can undermine all forms of knowledge that doesn't fit my sense of truth. And that interplay, again, of I want more knowledge, tell me what to do, but I'll also find fault with whatever you tell me. That kills this process because there's something innocent and young that needs to be engaged in order for the heart to be restored.
Well, I just want to say, and how's that working for you, everyone? How's that combined power, control, skepticism, deconstruction working for you? Is that joy, life, hope, love? Is that going great? It doesn't bring life.
Well, and again, that's one of the benefits. I'm loath to use the word, but it's one of the benefits, I think, of the pandemic is that what did seem to work has already been exposed as so fallacious, so false. So we're really back to that question of how much do you want to tend to union and to allow your own heart to receive. But again, I love this image of putting yourself in the place to receive.
Yes.
A few more sentences on that before we close.
Well, quiet. You have to get quiet, both externally and internally. And that takes a little practice. It's like learning to ride a bike or play an instrument. That's okay. It's bumpy at first. You get quiet. You learn the grace of release. You let go of that email you're obsessing about. You let go of that YouTube video you just saw that scandalized you, made you furious. You just let it go. You just learn the grace of release. I can't do anything about that. I let that go. So that you can be present to the presence of God. Yeah.
Well, let me go back to two thoughts before we conclude. The 30 days. How did you create it?
Oh my goodness, it's so gorgeous. So there is a wonderful app out there called Lectio 365. It was built by the prayer movement in England, and then it kind of spread from there. It's free. You can go get that one. So morning and evening meditation. There's scripture. But what I love about it is the diversity of voices and nationalities, and but they walk. Basically, it's a Bible thing. They walk you through the scriptures. It's lovely. I use it. It's lovely. So we built something that is more directed towards the restoration of the soul. Like the purpose and intent of 30 Days to Resilience is to take people through a morning and evening. It's about 8 to 10 minutes. Music, voices, narrative, quiet, pausing, reflection, space, journaling that will take you through a progression that will genuinely bring about, if nothing else, it will bring solace. Mm-hmm. It will. It's so comforting. But it does more than that. It restores union with Christ. It allows you to be an amphibian and to receive things like the river of life flowing through you. So it goes through, one module is on mental resilience. Another is on emotional resilience, but it's very, very kind. This isn't like a gym membership. This is care. This is kindness. This is it's free. It's on the 1 Minute Pause app. So if you get on the App Store, look for the 1 Minute Pause. We're the first answer that comes up. We're right there. Download the free app, open it up, and you'll see the very first feature is, hey, try this 30 days to resilient morning and evening thing, and you're just gonna love it.
Well, my friend, thank you. And may our audience enter fully and richly into the gift that you, through Jesus, have offered us all. And I do think that there is a certain kind of luscious coincidence that the week we get to spend on the water with you is when these podcasts come to be available to the audience.
Oh, that's very fun.
Yeah, didn't plan it, but let's just say I will look forward to being on the river of life further with you quite soon.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. This has been delightful.
Thank you, John.
The Allender Center podcast is produced by the Seattle School of Theology and Psychology.
If you'd like more information about the Allender Center, you can look at theallendercenter.org.